I have been a moderate fan of roller coasters, Brian Wang.
Hmm.
I'm not doing the ones where you go round and round and,
Yeah.
hang upside down and stuff, but, some decent high and low, but boy,
Hmm.
we had the roller coaster today. That's for
Right.
sure. So what were you thinking when Tesla stock went up, what, 18, 17, something, came
Right. Right.
down to one?
Right. One up. Yeah. So it was. It didn't seem like it had enough momentum to push through. It was hoping to get through that 291, 292 level, and it just went up to it and then went back down again. So um, with the technical analysis, it's relatively clear. Like you're in between two levels, and then either you go out the top or you go down through the bottom, or you just go sideways. So it's relatively straightforward that we're still in the sideways zone between about 265 or 252 at the worst, and then 291, 293, or whatever at the top. So until we break out, then it's just sideways. Yeah, so that's where we're
Yeah.
at.
So, I'm looking, of course, we've been talking about this. We talked about it yesterday, I think, and it seems
Mhm.
like with the FSD confirmation for Austin, the robotaxi confirmation for Austin in June,
Mhm.
with the tariffs being totally positive for Tesla by comparison to every other automaker, you
Mhm.
would think that that combination would have resulted, well, let's put it this way. As it was going up 18, I'm going, this makes sense.
Mhm.
So it would
Right.
seem like the fundamentals are really, really strong right now. Uh,
Mhm.
Maybe there's some options plays. Maybe there's some folks that were just looking for that chance to get out. But what do you think? What do you think, instead of on the non-technical, on the fundamental side? You have any thoughts about today?
I think um, if people believed and were totally certain that those two things were happening, FSD coming out in June, and with no human driver in Austin at a substantial way, and then the tariffs, 25% all non-American made cars and all parts. If if we're saying those things are definitively happening, either, you know, in June or the tariff things starting in April, implementing in May, that kind of thing. If you knew those things were happening, then you would say, okay, well, that means 300,000 more sales for Tesla this year, 100,000 more per quarter, right? So that would be just from the tariff situation, because it applies to 40%, 50% of cars, and Tesla is best positioned for having assembling all the cars here, and most of the parts are here, so they're just in terms of being more American made, they're more in compliance. And also they can change the fastest to get anything that's not um, American made. And then I also think in terms of like the value of the parts, in terms of like the batteries, the chips and everything like that, like the total bill of materials is also more there, again, easier to switch other parts out. Um, so the fact that it didn't break through means that people don't believe it for whatever reason. So the vast majority, and I can see it also on the betting markets, where
Mm.
like I'm in various betting markets, and the bettors, the predictors are saying, one, they don't think that the robotaxi is actually happening,
Oh,
and they don't think it's gonna happen by the end of the year. If it is, it's only like 54%. So the I can directly see when you ask,
mm.
hey,
Mm.
bet points, bet money that this is going to happen, if not like, oh yeah, 100%. And it didn't really move particularly when, so I can, my say of like, the price action told us people didn't believe it.
Yeah.
And then these other
Betting
sites that
market.
say, do you believe it? And
Yeah.
they say, no, I don't.
Yeah.
So, okay,
Ah,
people don't believe it.
interesting. So one of the things that I put up on X yesterday and today was that and nobody else is talking about this, but I think it's important. General Motors CEO, what's her name? Mary something, Barra,
Mhm.
the one who led, she hasn't been out there saying squat to anybody about this.
Right.
Ford CEO, he hasn't been out there saying anything to anybody. The unions finally made a statement today. What do you think they said?
Um, I guess good for
Yeah,
more U.S. jobs,
they like the tariffs.
right?
Good. Yeah, we're for the tariff. I think so. I started to do some numbers here because I was like, why aren't they screaming and yelling? Why aren't there lobbyists lined up outside the president's door trying to get the president to change on this? So I did a little analysis, and here's my analysis. Let's start with the two US based automakers, which are the only ones, we only got two besides Tesla. It's only GM and Ford. Stellantis is in, I don't know, the Netherlands or some part French and some part Netherlands or something like that. Anyway, so we really only have GM and Ford that are US based corporations that would really have the president's ear with regard to this stuff. They made about 1 million vehicles in Mexico total, and 900,000 of those were shipped to the US. So
Hmm.
10% stayed in Mexico or were shipped somewhere else.
Hmm.
All of the other makers, the Japanese, the South Koreans, the Chinese, everybody
And the
else,
Europeans. Yeah.
the Europeans, everybody else that's got a plant in Mexico, they made 2.5 million, with about 2 million of those going to I'm sorry, with about 2.25 million going to the US. So those are the guys that are going to get clobbered.
Right.
But then I thought, okay, let's analyze this a little bit using what I've been talking about on the channel for a while now with regard to
Mm.
how these tariff things play out with export and import. So I thought, these guys will beat up their suppliers. They'll beat their first, second, third tier suppliers to death to get them, and maybe they'll get a 5% reduction out of that 25. Is that fair? Does that seem reasonable?
A 5% reduction of what?
Of their cost of goods with regard to the things they buy in
Oh,
Mexico.
okay. So they don't have to pass through. I see. So they
They
take
won't
the
have to
hit
pass
and
through.
then, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
they'll just beat up their suppliers.
Yeah.
Number two, I think they'll probably get about a 2% reduction in labor cost
Hmm.
because right now there's a $16 an hour rule with regard. They have to pay a minimum of $16 an hour for their labor in Mexico as part of the agreement.
Agreements.
Right.
Yeah.
I think those agreements are off the table.
Hmm.
The 25% tariff. I don't think the agreements are in place anymore. I could be wrong, but I don't think they are. So with labor representing about 5% of the cost of vehicle, I'm saying I think they'll recover about 2% of the cost of, because they'll lower, those guys are all going to getting a paycheck. Their paycheck's going to go down.
Yeah.
I might be high on that, but that's roughly. And then Mexico might subsidize some of this.
Hmm.
What happens with countries? They might come in and say, okay, we'll help you out for a while. And then the makers might eat some margins in order to keep the plants running, like Tesla ate the margins to keep their plants running.
Yeah.
I'm going to say overall, maybe there is going to be a 15% pass through.
Hmm.
You and I have looked at those charts that other people have put out, not me, not you, I don't think, that show what happened. I think it was Kathy Woods, was it, that put out some of these, where it shows as you get the price from 50 to 40, you get this much more TAM, et cetera. So they're not going to lose all of this business.
Hmm.
Maybe they're only going to lose 10% of that 3 million.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
that would still be a little more than three, about 3.5 million out of Mexico. I'm sorry, total imports worldwide into the United States, 3.7 million.
Hmm.
So if we take that number, 10%, maybe it's more, maybe it's less, but it's a good number to start with. Be about 370,000 cars a year that
Okay.
you're losing. Well, that's not the end of the world to lose 10% of your sales.
Hmm. Right. Okay.
And for Ford and General Motors, and for the people that are already making in the United States, I'm sure they're already thinking, oh, here's how I can use this car to replace that car. Here's how I can increase my production on this line in order to make that up. Here's how maybe
Mm.
I'll start selling some of these countries that I haven't been pushing that hard on, to sell more in Guatemala or in Argentina or wherever that, I'm making them in Mexico. So
Hmm.
I think that the reason you're not hearing from these automakers is it's not as big a deal as everybody's making it out to be. What do you think?
I think it's a big deal. What is it? Jeff Lutz saying is the Armageddon and be shutting factories down.
Right.
So, and then passing 15% through on a $40,000 car, that's $6,000.
Mhm.
And then 15% on a, it's on a $50,000 car, that's $2,500. So basically it's on the order of the EV tax credit,
Right.
right? It's in
Right.
that range.
Right.
So, um, yes, it's not completely complete everything, but it's a pretty big impact, especially for cars that aren't particularly that differentiated, right? Where if I was comparing, you know, car A to car B and they're like really similar, and
Mhm.
then I'm just looking at the sticker price and then saying, okay, well, you know, I'm just then comparing, and then one suddenly goes up 7,500 and the other one doesn't,
Right.
or one goes up 5,000, the other one doesn't, then I think a lot of minds would be changed. It's like, did I really want that, you know, Honda Pilot or whatever like that, or did I want something else, right? Then, if you change the price by 15%, uh, that's going to change minds. So
So
I think it matters.
so it's gonna change minds. Okay, so I'm looking at
Yeah.
this car over here. It was 50, now it's 57.5.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also looking at this other car over here, which was 55, and it's still
Mm-hmm.
55. So now it's $2,500 cheaper. But where is the $55,000 car made?
So, um,
In the United States
right, right,
by the same maker. Or by one of the makers who's making in the United States. So it can be
right.
General Motors, it could be Ford, or it could be Honda or Stellantis, other people that are making in the United States. So this
Right.
is, again, you see my point? It's like, okay, I might lose that sale, but who's gonna get the sale? Well, I'm gonna get, I'm gonna get my percent. And so,
Mm,
to your point, which is why we even started doing the show today, is
yeah,
I think a bunch of those sales are going to go to Tesla,
right, right,
okay? Because Tesla is hardly impacted at all. And
right.
so, if we're looking at 370,000, that will almost certainly, and I think it'll be more than 10%. If we're looking at 370,000 that will be going away or
Mm,
there will be a choice now. I think one of the major choices is going to be towards Tesla. And I
mhm.
think you were thinking in terms of maybe 100,000 a quarter. Was that kind of your number?
Yeah, that's about my number that I'm thinking it would be, right? But then you have to be able to make those cars.
Right.
But I can't believe that if, for Elon and for any other car maker, that once Trump came in and he was saying 25% tariff, then you whistling by the graveyard of not doing anything makes utterly no sense. Like even when, like, I believe Trump when he said that he only delayed it from February because he got um, the car makers, and probably Ford and GM, begging him, give us another month,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And he said, okay, I'll give you another month, but nothing else, right? So one, they should have been moving already, and then
Yep.
they got an extra month to do something. I understand it takes even more time, but you're talking about the mitigations that you were describing. Um, and then same thing for Tesla, that Tesla would be saying, okay, we're switching over to the new Model Y, but we should anticipate that this will be in some form substantially, where we will need to make another 100,000 cars per quarter beyond whatever else we're planning, beyond getting a new lower price vehicle, all this kind of stuff, right? So getting another shift, like for Tesla, it's easy in terms of there are not enough shifts in Austin.
Right.
So getting suppliers, getting another shift in Austin, getting up another 100,000 vehicles, and it's pretty much going to be mostly Model Y until you get another vehicle in.
Mhm.
Um, it's it's not like, like the 3D chess that you're talking about of like I got 40 different models. I'm gonna do this model and that model. For Tesla's like it's another shift in Austin, and I gotta do another Model Y. It's like it's like it doesn't take a bunch of figuring out how am I going to get more cars. Those are the cars they're going to have to make, and then I get more of them. So, um, like,
So,
when do they
so,
get them more production in?
so in my view,
Mhm.
maybe the reason the stock acted today the way that it did
Mhm.
is the same when we get some of this information. Like tomorrow, we're going to get the PCE, right?
Mhm.
And we get the PCE number, and the headline number is this, and the stock market jumps,
Yeah.
or the stock market crashes.
Yeah.
And then they get an hour, they get 2 hours to start
Mhm.
looking into the details. And then all of a sudden the stock market corrects because you're like,
Right.
oh, well, look at that detail. I didn't see that. Oh, if I'd known that. And so I think maybe an awful lot of people today were going through the same exercise that I just went through. And they're,
Mhm. Yeah.
well, yeah, these guys are not making those phone calls. They're not screaming. There's no headlines. And the union
Mhm.
said it was a fine deal. So they've already done the 3D chess, the 4D chess. They've already been thinking about this for months. They've already
Mhm.
lined up their options and their alternatives.
Mhm.
And they also know just how much it's going to impact them. Do you know that even the president of Mexico has not been jumping up and down? I haven't seen a headline on her at all.
Mhm.
Since
Yeah.
she jumping up and down. Canada is, and you're talking
Right.
about this many cars compared to Mexico.
Right, but I think it's a matter of how you're negotiating. That if you're jumping up and down and making a big scene about it and saying I'm going to fight Trump, it's to me, if you're in a weaker position strategically, then you're going to quietly negotiate, do some deal, give um, something that Trump wants. And Trump wants to renationalize and bring stuff back in. So then you have to be aligned with the program and again talk nice and then get to what the deal is. So if you're quietly working out your deal, then you don't go out like Zelensky out to the media, say something crazy, right? And then screw it all up. Like if you're competent, you will quietly do your deal. I think there's quiet deals being done with the UK. There's quiet deals. India's trying to do quiet deals, and then because it is a transactional thing. Like the goal is okay. The U.S. let Nick and Trump say, okay, we want the stuff back in, and here's how we want it to happen.
Mhm.
So then if you know that's how they want the relationship to be, then you as a country, Mexico or whatever, can then position yourself to the US gets what they want, but then we get enough of what we want. Because the US doesn't want to crush the other countries for the sake of crushing other companies. They want some kind of where possible win-win. So
Yeah, and if you look at Canada, who is making the most noise and just they're apoplectic now, they are going into an election here in what, another 10 days or something. Uh,
it's another month still.
the month till- so they're going into an election, so you understand why they'd be a little bit more, out there.
Grandstanding showing, yeah.
Grandstand. But the truth is if you go back 3 years, the Canadian dollar has depreciated that whole 25%. So
Right.
basically, so basically, the 25% tariff is only going to put the United States back to where we were with Canada 3 years ago.
Right, right. So it wasn't 25% down, but it was down from about, high 70s to low 70s. So it was more like a 10% move. But yeah, if you were to take your currency down for Canada's sake from 71% down to 65%, take 10% out. So you do the move you talked about and depreciate 10%. And you say, okay, well, now we took out almost all of it.
Right,
Right.
right. So
So,
again, I think to your point, you know, even a good candidate in Canada right now might be better off to be trying to put together a sweet deal, you know,
mhm,
before they're elected, be on the
yeah.
phone and go and then be able to be the headline would be, I got, Trump and I have come to we come to a good deal. We found a way to do
Mhm,
this. You know,
right. Yeah. So it it's still some pieces in motion, but the overall objective is more jobs, more production in the United States. That is the stated end goal. that Trump and Lutnick and everyone wants on the U.S. team,
Right.
right? So they have the means to control how things come to the United States, and the U.S. being the big buyer of these products. So um, as much as there's contortions to mitigate it, then if they okay, you went all this contortion, I did this thing, I still have the goal of moving things back in, so then I will pull another lever. So eventually it's kind of like, okay, you did that. I still want it back. So then I'm going to keep pulling until it comes over. So I don't see where, how you can win. The fact that you can mitigate it once, it's like, it's like, boxing match, Mike Tyson, whatever, and someone's punching you in the face. It's kind of like, okay, I roll with the punch. Another punch is still coming. I don't know
Yes.
what you're doing.
Right. Yes. Unless I've got a real unless I have some cards, as Elon,
Right.
the analogy that Elon, I mean that keeps
Trump
saying
did, yeah.
is you don't have any cards. Uh,
Right.
so it becomes a lot harder when you're a fraction of the size in terms of the TAM on whatever products you're trying to sell back and forth.
Right.
Somebody was making the point today, and I realize this, of course, is because as an exporter, once China got in the game, even though they were much poorer at the time when I was selling them, once they got in the game, your number one customer was China. That was the number
Mhm.
one customer you wanted to get. In the
Yeah.
United States, it might have been Walmart or Kmart, or I mean, or yeah, back in the day, Kmart or Toys R Us or Target. Those might have been your best customers in the United States. But the biggest, if you're exporting, your biggest potential customer was China. And
Mhm.
so every country in the world, the number one customer is the United States. It's
Mhm.
not close.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
so you are in this situation better off to look for ways to stay in the game.
Right.
How can we make it so that we stay in the game? And as I pointed out on this channel many times, it's not just about what Trump decides. It's also about what the buyer at Walmart decides.
Right.
The
Right.
consumer buyer and the buyer, the purchasing agent,
The corporate buyer. Yeah.
corporate buyer. Yeah, he's going like, no, I'm not going to pay 10 cents more.
Right.
And then that
Right.
settles that. Or the one I like the best is like, okay, we're going to put a tariff on apples. Apples, oh no, what are we going
Mhm.
to do? And I walk
Mhm.
into the grocery store, and
Mhm.
my apples are now 3.99 a pound instead of 2.99 a pound. And I'm going
Mhm.
to go, how much are those oranges? I
Yeah.
mean, lots of transferability, or there's lots of choices that
Yeah.
consumers make when these kinds of things happen.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, all these actions have other impacts. Like if you were to depreciate your currency in order to keep selling,
Right.
the problem is that if you're importing commodities like oil or other stuff that are denominated in US dollars, then your cost of inputs goes up because your currency went down, right?
Right.
So it's a lot of complex moving parts are happening here.
Very much so, all the time. There's no doubt about that. So, okay. If Tesla then is going to get a few 100,000 maybe extra cars this year, and Grok believed, when I did the analysis on Grok, I don't know what Grok told you, but Grok told me maybe 300,000 extra cars this year, 600,000 next year.
Right, that's about what I got to.
Is that what you got? Wow, look at that. Gave the same answer
Yeah.
twice.
Not exact same answer. I think it was like 250 and then
Right.
540, whatever. Yeah, but ballpark. Yeah.
Okay. And then you and I have talked about it, maybe even last night, that we'll definitely, there's no way in the world the Model Y is not going to sell more than it did last year anyway.
Right.
Okay. There's no way in the world that Cybertruck's not going to sell more this year than it did last year. At
Right.
some point, we're going to get the rear wheel drive for
Mhm.
60 or 65 or whatever it's going to be. And that's going to sell a lot more units. They did, Joe showed today, Tegmeyer showed some um, uh, uh, the next level down on the new Model Ys. So there's some in the parking lot now. And so maybe those are about ready to start coming out. And then,
So he said he saw like a lower price model of a Model
yeah, in
Y.
other words, right now, the only thing you can buy is the launch. That's what they call it, the launch edition.
Oh, launch vehicle. Oh,
So
okay, yeah.
there was some
That's
non-launch edition versions. Yes.
okay. So not the rumored super inexpensive
Right.
base
Oh,
model
no, no,
thing.
no, not that one. Yes. And then we have that one
Potentially, but we don't know. It's just
someday,
a rumor.
some
Yeah.
point. And then we have uh, the my expectation, which I talk about, nobody else does, that once we have unsupervised, all these cars are going to sell more.
Right.
I just think it's obvious.
Right.
Am I missing something?
No, well, we're aligned on that. We're
We're
aligned
aligned
on that.
with that. Nobody else agrees with me.
Right.
I'm not saying that. Jeff Lutz probably agrees with me. But anyway, yeah, so we get more cars out of that. And then there's the question of when do these entrepreneurs start buying? Once they see Austin. Once you've been
Right.
to Austin,
Mhm.
you'll never go back to Paris. No, or so I can't.
Yeah.
Not, that's going to work.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we've got all these different
Positive factors, increased
yeah,
production, everything good. Right.
yeah,
But yet still the stock just sits there and the all the talk is negative. Yes. It
yeah.
just
So,
it is. So I think it goes to again, there's a lack of belief.
yeah,
They don't believe robotaxi is coming. Not in June, not in Q3. They don't believe it's coming. At least more than half
right,
don't. And
right.
then for the tariffs, they don't think it's going to stick or something, and something's gonna, yeah, I can't get what they're thinking is not going to happen. Like I think something's a substantial things are going to happening in April. There's some negotiation wiggle room, but the end result over the next couple months seems to be that they're going to be applied. So yeah, so the lack of belief and when do people suddenly believe it? I guess it's kind of like before the election that a lot of people thought, hey, Trump could win and something like that, and then until it happens, then in those hours of it actually getting locked in, and then shifts over. So I think there could be some kind of um, critical, okay, now I believe it. One for the unsupervised car, it would be clearly, okay, you see 100 of them driving around or 1,000 of them driving around
Right,
in Austin.
right. Yes.
Then it's kind of like, okay, it's happening. I'm seeing the same thing that I saw um, on Cybercab, Robotaxi Day
Right,
in
right.
October last year, but it's in a far larger areas over the whole city or something like that. And then, you know, the, but then it's also like you're seeing it in China right now,
Yeah.
where the FSD is there. They're showing videos of it one after another. That I would have thought that would have moved things more too. So it's like, that's clearly happening. People don't believe it somehow, or some kind of full authorization thing they don't believe, or they need to hear a number.
Yeah.
So I guess in theory, if something happened like that in Austin, you're seeing the cars driving around, but people are still somehow um, justifying, making up reasons why. Yes, yes, like we see 1,000 cars driving around, no human driver, but
Yeah. Well, maybe it comes down to your original thought. I really like this. I think it was like 2 weeks ago when you first suggested the idea that we're going into the bad news peak.
right.
And it's not just Tesla. It's kind
Mhm.
of the economy too. So the
Right.
VIX, I just looked it up, 18.6. So
Mhm.
that's up a little bit from yesterday, but not
Yeah.
as high as it was last week. So we might still, I mean, the chaos is still out there. There's still
Right.
a lot of chaos, and the chaos, I'm beginning to see a lot more people, and I know this will sound like I'm, the conservative who's just loving it with Trump, but
Mhm.
we've got the highest levels ever by a lot of people that think the country's going in the right direction.
Mhm.
Trump is at 52% on Rasmussen today approval. I mean, that's the highest he's ever. I don't know. I mean, that's maybe close to the highest he's ever been. Certainly a lot higher than he was in most of his first term. So you've got a situation where the bad news might be starting to come out, kind of to your point.
Yeah.
And we go through this weekend and we get into Wednesday. We get the final decisions on the tariffs. We get the numbers from Tesla. Maybe the VIX cools down a bit, gets back down to the 12s, 11s, maybe we end up in a risk on market again.
Right. And it seems like stuff for Tesla and stuff for the markets is next week. It's like April 2nd, tariffs, big tariff day, April 2nd, um, Tesla Q1 volume numbers. So how many cars do they make? Production, deliveries, how many battery packs they sell. So for definitely for anyone who's involved in buying or selling Tesla, it's kind of like, it's next week. It's like that day is when it all kind of happens. And then it's a question of like, is there sell the news, buy on the news? What is the news? Exactly what does it all mean? And then does it take a day or two to digest? But it's kind of like you would you would not expect it to stay flat in a range. It would like it should bust out one way or the other, and it should be, I think, a continued move beyond that because the big question is the tariff, and especially for also some other stuff, with um, um,
War in Ukraine,
war in Ukraine, other things. Yeah, there's a bunch of other things that could settle out as well, but we know for sure several big shoes are dropping
right,
early next week.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with my theory that we'll see a lot of sideways chop through the end of April, maybe even into May. But that sideways chop on the market, sideways chop on Tesla. I think we may be sideways up.
Mhm.
So there may be a little up and then sideways there. I don't think we're going to see the big breakout until we're, again, end of April into May. I think that's when we begin to see the market and Tesla begin to pull away.
Well, for Tesla, something that I think would be totally undeniable in terms of now we must move would be, here's the low priced car,
Right.
and we're going to make 100,000, 200,000 a
Sure.
quarter or more, right?
Well, 2000,
Where something, so we're suddenly just like it's boom, it's here, it's um, the earnings wave is clearly here,
yes.
right? Whereas like the chat GPT and then the money started flowing in and big quarters. And then by July 2nd, the next reading of how many you make,
Mhm.
if that's at 600,000 or 700,000, instead of, a 480 or something like that, right? If for Q2, where it's like, okay, we produced a huge amount of cars,
Right.
right? That should unfold to a certain extent where the Troy Tesla is counting cars, China giving some weekly numbers. If that becomes relatively obvious throughout the quarter, and then it lands with the July 2nd number, then those kind of um, in your face good news of like, okay, now we're up 30% on earnings, which I think um, Sir Basher talked about, that it could start happening in Q2, right? So if you have these kind of like really big or making huge numbers, and if there's any kind of guidance on that April 20th or April 22nd
Right.
on the
Right.
earnings
Right.
call, where they
Right.
say, no, it's going to happen. So having really positive, happy talk and telegraphing this is going to happen, which as executives, they should be telegraphing. If
Right.
they know
Right.
this will
Right.
happen,
Right.
then they should say, hey, get ready for it. The fact that the market may or may not believe it for a little while, if it's clearly there, then there should be some positive direction to
Well,
the
to
market.
your point, one of the things that they couldn't deny is if version 14 went out to the employees.
Right, right.
This
That's
would,
another,
this would, this would be one they couldn't deny. Now they might wait until it goes out to the first round of the early, the early
prerogative.
round guys, the Chuck Smiths and whatnot. Chuck Smith, no, that's wrong.
Chuck
Chuck
Cook,
Cook, I
Chuck
said,
Cook. Yeah,
yeah, the Chuck Cook and his gang, and they get the version 14 unsupervised. I mean, if that starts to actually get out there,
yeah.
I would think that's kind of undeniable. Oh, also, did you? I don't know if you saw this morning. There's an association. I should look it up. I don't think I could find it fast enough. There's a group of all the car makers,
Hmm.
and they have this association with regard to automated drivers.
Hmm.
And they put out they've put out a letter to the president and to NISTA saying, you guys need to come up with standard.
Okay.
We need a standard. So it wasn't just Tesla. This is like the entire automobile industry saying, hey guys, we need a national standard. We don't want it to be all the states and cities, everybody else making decisions. We need a national standard on self-driving, and we need to do it quickly.
Okay.
I thought that alone to me, if I was the only guy playing the stock market, I'd be buying so much Tesla right now.
Right. Right.
Because that's a
Yeah.
big thing. Now
Right.
it's no longer just Tesla in the room where you're going to go, oh, well, they had to do it because the president.
Yeah.
No, now you got the entire industry saying we need these rules.
Right. Right.
So,
So yeah, so a bunch of things, next week is big and Q2 is huge. So it's a lot of things are coming in and they're like, as big as a Model 3 launch or a Model Y launch, because you're literally launching the next volume vehicle potentially in
right,
Q2,
right.
and then you're finally solving FSD. So it's like the things that we've been waiting for, 5, 10 years, it's all happening. So it's kind of like, how does that not move the stock? It just,
Yeah, and you just shipped, I don't know, it wasn't very important. You just shipped the first shipment out of Shanghai on the batteries, which
yeah,
is
Megapack.
the equivalent of when it's fully ramped, will be the equivalent of the entire output of the Berlin factory.
Right, right.
Just that factory will have the same amount of profit as Berlin.
Yeah,
And yeah, yawn.
yeah, right.
All right, Brian. I got anything
Mm.
anything else? I don't know. That's all I had on my list for you and I
No,
here.
no, it's things should be moving, but there's a bunch of disbelief. So we'll see, next week when, or even, later this week. Maybe people start believing. I don't know.
Okay. One day left in this week. Well, okay, Brian, as
Mhm.
always, love having you on. Let me know in the comments below what you're seeing, why you think maybe things are still hooked. What did we mess this up? Did we get it right? I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear what you have to say about this. And then later, what is this? This is nighttime. This is 7:45, not for Brian and I, but it will be when you're watching it or later. Earlier today, we had a nice conversation with Bradford Ferguson. I have no idea what we said because I haven't done that video yet, but I'm sure it was amazing. I told Bradford I wanted to talk about gold and about
Hmm.
covered calls. So
Hmm.
I don't know if that's what we ended up talking about, but maybe. So I'm going to put the card right here in case you want to go check it out. That's all I
Hmm.
got for you. Brian, thanks again to all of you. It's
Okay.
been great talking to you.